So this new pope, I don't know why I always find this stuff so fascinating. I stopped being a Catholic 30 years ago, stopped being a Catholic and stopped being a Christian. And yet here I am, like somebody from Michigan who moved to Ontario 30 years later, still rooting for the Tigers instead of the Blue Jays. Anyway, dude has a ancestry from Haiti and New Orleans, and is a citizen of Peru because he did a whole lot of his, bishoping in Peru. And he tangled with J.D. Vance over, Catholic doctrine, and said, J.D. Vance is wrong. You don't care about your family, then your neighbors, then your town, then your country, and finally other countries. That's just not how it works. God, I love all this stuff, and it stirs up so much in me. For example, it made me think of the last time I took communion in a Catholic church. I grew up Catholic, and then, for the obvious reasons, I left. My whole family left. We are serious Catholics. My parents met in what is now Belize, what was then British Honduras, as papal volunteers. My father was tossed out of a seminary, rolled a Studebaker, racing with some other kid, and the honchos at the seminary called him on the carpet and said that he should reconsider his calling. It was hard on him. But I'm glad, because, pretty glad to be here. Anyway, we were like real deal Catholics, and also trying to be good people, and those are two plates that are hard to juggle given the facts on the ground in every direction. You either need to have a real sense of humor, like my Aunt Mary, who just never quit being a Catholic. She was married to a former monk. My uncle, John McCabe, chair of the English department, Chaucer scholar, died of emphysema, referred to his deathbed as the launching pad. My mom was visiting him while he was dying, and he was on the phone, and it was clearly a freighted conversation. He hung up, and she said, "Who are you just talking to?" And he said, my brothers, my former brothers, back when I was a monk in Kentucky. They are carpenters that order, so I was ordering my casket. And she said, "Wow, that's quite a conversation to have. That must have been," and he looked at her from his deathbed and said, "Singular. It was singular." But my Aunt Mary, his widow, she just kept going to church despite the obvious facts on the ground. And in some ways, I really salute her. If you think that an organization has a chance of doing more good than harm, stick with it, right? But she would go to masses celebrated by women priests who considered themselves Catholic priests, but they were women. In other words, heretics. I'm sure this new pope has a lot that I could admire, but I'm sure he would also consider those women heretics, right? And I would ask my Aunt Mary, and her, as she declined, like, what do you think the brass in the Vatican would think about you, going to these masses celebrated by heretics? And she would say, "Who cares?" Oh, God. She was my kind of Catholic, She went to Mass all the time, and then she would take communion, and as everyone was settling down for the priest's, weekly sermon, she would walk the fuck out of the church. She would say, "Well, I don't need to know what this man thinks. I've done the thing I came here to do. I've gotten together with God." What I'm thinking of now is the very last time I took communion in a Catholic church. It was it was at the funeral of a friend of my parents, an immigrant from Sierra Leone. We grew up on the block together. He and his wife, an American, and their 4 kids, and my parents' 4 kids. We all sort of stacked up, the 4 of us, age-wise. 3 boys and a girl over there, 4 boys on my side. Neighborhood stuff. It's a beautiful neighborhood, northwest side of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. At the height of what we wound up living there at the height of the movement for integration. That was the big term. My parents looked at busing, I think correctly, as sort of a top-down, bureaucratic, liberal, scoldy trope. They thought this doesn't make any sense. What we should do is that white people need to all just move into the inner city and live among, those people, so that they're not those people. They're just our neighbors. And then we will all together, living together, demand economic justice and just plain old respect, so that it won't be some sort of, project to help those people. We need to just move there and become those people. It is in this way that I became, an underprivileged, which is to say economically poor, inner city child. You're looking at one. He grew up to be me. Had a get out of jail free card, Anyway, we grew up with this family on the block. And, years and years and years later, well, of course he died. People die. And my parents went to the funeral and they were among the close friends. I remember my mom and dad getting up to sort of read a little bit about him. My dad choking up and my mom finishing the sentence for him, which is characteristic of them. I suppose my own wife would absolutely be able to finish a sentence for me, and I would absolutely be the guy to choke up now that I think of it. But I was sitting in that funeral mass behind one of their kids. He's a gay man. And, after I left the Catholic Church, I probably would have spent a bit of time going, well, I'm never taking communion from those people again. And, you grow beyond that. And, there I am at this funeral. I'm probably in my 40s, sitting behind this childhood friend of mine who's, out now. I remember just once asking him, like, what do you think your dad, a devout Catholic, thinks about it, you being gay? And he was like, man, my dad doesn't want to think about any of his kids having sex. Oh, God. I really feel for people who don't have gay friends. You can learn so much about yourself just by talking to someone that at first you might think is different. But there I am sitting behind him, and I'm thinking about all of this, love and parenthood and partnering. And then it occurs to me, they start doing communion. And I'm like, I'm not going to do that, not out of any sense of rancor toward the church. I'd certainly grown up to the point where it's all a mixed bag, No, it was more like, I guess I was thinking, I don't know, as a gesture of community. The old saying by Terence, homo sum nihil humani alienum, Roman playwright, 2nd century. I am human, so nothing human is alien to me, is foreign to me. I'll go have communion in much the same way that if a dervish invited me to whirl with him, I'd be like, yeah, sure, this is what we do, we humans. So I'm kind of thinking along those lines, like, this man was a part of my neighborhood, part of my family. You bet I'm going to go to communion. And then of course, I was thinking about my childhood friend, and I was thinking about the brass in Rome who would absolutely not approve of his taking communion, right? Or many of whom, I'm sure, would be like, he can't take communion. He's living in sin, Of course, we're all living in sin. Like, what are we parsing here? And then I realized, whatever he does, I'm doing. And his row got up to go to communion, he got up. So, well, then I'm going to stand behind him. Yeah. That was a super sad day. And, all the hugs and all the goodbyes. And then I took my folks out to lunch. And, anyway, here I am, still rooting for the Tigers.